Okay, we're live.
Thank you. I'd like to call this council and committee meeting to order. Before we proceed further, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are all located within Fort Erie is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe people, Mississaugas of the Credit. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, your worship, with the exception of Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you. There is no addendum this evening. I just wanted to briefly reflect upon the shocking and untimely passing of Jessica Schmidt, the wife of our Deputy Fire Chief, Mark Schmidt. And she leaves 4 children, her husband, her family, and she's a tremendous loss, not only to them, but to our entire community. She was a lovely, caring, and compassionate person, and I know that our thoughts and prayers go out to her. Chief, I know that you're very close with your deputy chief, and I wonder if you wanted to say anything at this time.
Thank you, Your Worship. The outpouring of support, both from council, staff, the fire community, you can imagine, not only locally to Fort Erie, but provincially. Mark has a lot of friends. We're doing everything we possibly can to support Mark and his kids. You know, there's no way or no words to say how much this hurts, and we're doing everything in our power. The fire department and EMS did a remarkable job, and I can't tell you how, especially in these times, how proud I am of them. But I talk to Mark all the time, almost every hour, and we're, you know, with as much support as we can from everywhere we're getting, we'll get there one day. So I again thank, on behalf of Mark and his kids and the fire department, the support from the community and council has truly been remarkable. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and please assure Mark that if there's anything that we as a council or a municipal administration can do, we want to be there to assist in any way that we can.
Thank you, and I will.
Thank you. A couple of items. There's been a lot of activity from the provincial government with respect to the stay-at-home order that was issued last week. Today, all the schools will be closed and so all learning will be online starting next week after the vacation is over for, as I understand it, an indefinite period of time. The Niagara Health put out a media release this afternoon, basically indicating that they're asking people to continue to follow public health measures in order to minimize further increases in COVID-19. And that includes continuing to wear a mask, physical distance, wash your hands, maintain contact only with members in your own family, which is what we're supposed to be doing. They indicate that, and this is a message from the president, Lynn Guerrero, that in less than 2 weeks, the overall number of COVID-19 patients in the hospital, Niagara Hospital's care has increased from 11 on March the 31st to 39 today. And they're seeing patients who are younger in age. At this time, their ICU is at 88% capacity. That is 53 patients, of which 12 are COVID patients. They're going to be opening 3 additional beds, but obviously the situation is critical from their perspective. That is an extremely high occupancy rate for an intensive care unit. And as most of you know, people are being shuffled around the province to ensure that they have access to an ICU bed as required. Niagara Health is also postponing scheduled surgeries as directed by the province. And that means that people who are sometimes in critical need of surgery are going to have those surgeries delayed because of this outbreak. President Guerrero also talks about the the rally that took place on the weekend where hundreds of people were not following public health measures. And she finds that extremely discouraging for the dedicated individuals involved in the healthcare teams and in providing the essential healthcare services to the residents of Niagara. And I can only imagine how discouraging that would be for people who are on a daily basis putting themselves on the line to care for those who are ill, many of whom have COVID, many of whom have other illnesses. And these people are being run ragged. I mean, all of us know healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, healthcare aides, anybody in that system is being run ragged. So they're asking the public to please follow those guidelines and exercise some good sense. And I have to say that I can't pass this meeting without talking a little bit on my own about this COVID-19 and the current lockdown. And as you all know, over the past 10 days, the number of COVID-19 cases, hospitalizations, and intensive care unit patients have ballooned. I want to comment that there are many, many people who are following the guidelines, and they're going out of their way to ensure that those around them are safe. There are also many people in our community who are trying to help small businesses. And, you know, there's not much that we can do, but there are some things that we can do. So I want to commend all of those people, which is the vast majority really of our residents, who are complying with the rules and trying to do their best to ensure that those around them are safe and that the businesses that are there can at least get some revenues. But as a result of the third wave, the Premier announced a 28-day stay-at-home order last week, and that measure is draconian by any standard. However, these measures are being imposed by the most pro-business Premier in recent Ontario history. The order closes all but essential businesses except for takeout and curbside service. And as I mentioned before, now the schools are being closed to in-school learning. These decisions were based not only on the advice of medical and health experts, but on the clear facts that are evolving. The reality is that the healthcare system in Ontario will be overwhelmed if extraordinary action is not taken and enforced. Most of us are familiar with the stories of large family gatherings during the Easter weekend, those returning from outside the country and evading quarantine, a continuation of short-term rentals for recreational purposes, unnecessary travel, and gatherings of individuals contrary to the provincial orders and without adherence to public health guidelines. What is behind the thinking of those who engage in these activities is more than a mystery. As of today, Fort Erie has recorded almost 500 cases of COVID-19. The Niagara region has recorded nearly 11,000 cases. Those may seem like small numbers, but they are assuredly devastating to the families in Fort Erie or elsewhere in Niagara who have lost loved ones to this pandemic. 376 loved ones as of today. Anyone who has been paying attention will know that healthcare workers, including doctors and nurses, are being stretched to the limit. ICUs in Toronto, Peel, and York are at capacity. Patients are being transported to ICUs in other parts of the province for care. I'm having difficulty understanding those who think that there is no need for them to abide by rules established to keep everyone in the community safe. Who do they expect to care for them should they become infected by their thoughtlessness and inconsiderate conduct? The very nurses, doctors, and healthcare workers they have recklessly exposed to risk, or that their contact is running ragged, the hospitals that they may not be able to accommodate them. I understand that months of restrictions on our lives is very difficult and challenging for all of us, more so for some than others. But we all have the ability to be selfless and considerate of others. I urge everyone to comply with the provincial orders and public health guidelines. We have 5 miles to go in a 26.2 mile marathon. Let's not give in to the temptation to quit now. The number of cases in those under 39 years of age is increasing alarmingly. Now, almost 1/2 of all cases of COVID-19 in Niagara have been experienced by those 39 years of age and younger, and the percentage keeps rising. The variants are more virulent, although this virus has never discriminated as to age, sex, economic status, race, or personal beliefs. Some of these individuals who are being infected are essential workers and have no choice but to be exposed to contamination. But others have a choice. We all have rights in a democratic society, but those rights are also attended by responsibilities. We are governed by rules. Without them, there would be anarchy. There are ways to protest and dispute the actions of government. But let me be clear, the rights of individuals end at the point where they begin to encroach upon the rights of those around them. No one has the democratic right to infect another with a contagious disease, particularly one as virulent as COVID-19. No one has the democratic right to put those around them at risk. No one has the democratic right to do whatever they want without regard to rules designed to protect those around them. It is time for everyone to show respect to others and to accept the responsibilities that accompany our rights. We need everyone to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, now more so than ever. So hopefully that will have some influence on some of those who continue to baffle my mind. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I have two. One is PDS 12 for 2021, and that is related to the cannabis site plan approval. And I have a client that may be engaged in that process at some point in the future. And the other one is PDS 28 2021, which relates to the award of contract for British Centennial Park multi-use court conversion. One of the parties that bid on that contract is a client of mine. So I will ask one of the other councillors to assume the chair for that consent agenda item when we get there. If there are no other disclosures of pecuniary interest.
Your worship, we should separate it from the package.
Yeah, we'll do that when we get down there. I'm still at notice of upcoming public meetings. Yeah, so we'll do that then. There is one upcoming proposed zoning bylaw amendment with respect to 1485 Garrison Road, and that will be dealt with on Monday, April the 19th, 2021, which is next Monday at 6 p.m. via video teleconference. The information report on that will be available to the public on Wednesday, April the 14th, 2021. There are no public meetings this evening. With respect to the consent agenda, there is the one report, PDS 28 2021, that should be removed from the package. Are there any other reports that anyone would wish removed from the package to be dealt with? If not, then can I have a mover for the consent agenda, less PDS 28 2021? Councillor Zanko. Are there any questions or comments with respect to any of the reports? Councillor Noyes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Just some comments on IS 13 2021 about the dust suppressant. And I'm just wondering, last year was a pretty dry year. And I'm just wondering, did we use all our dust suppressant, or did we go over? I'm just concerned that we've already had one very dry spring and we've had our first fire ban, I think, this early in the year. I'm just concerned that we want to make sure there's enough dust suppressant for the gravel roads, particularly if this is a dry summer.
Mr. Walsh.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a unit price contract, and certainly we set budget limits, but there are guidelines, and if more is needed, we can make a decision internally after reviewing our numbers to apply more if necessary.
Councillor Noyes.
That's fine, thank you.
Anything further?
No.
Okay, any other councillors? So I had a few questions with respect to PDS 2921. I'm going to support the recommendation, but I had some questions about the process. And had some communication with our Director of Planning, Ms. Dolch, earlier today about the process, because I note that the approval for this draft plan would have expired in September of 2020. It was extended by staff, which has the authority to do that. Is that correct, Ms. Dolch?
That's correct. It did. It was to expire in September, and we've temporarily extended it until now, until we could get before council. They have, if I can elaborate a bit, they have entered into the actual subdivision agreement. They've signed, posted their securities. The only thing they haven't done at this point in time is registered their M plan in terms of finalizing that approval. And the reason they hadn't done that is because they like to pre-service, put in the servicing, and then put the bars in. And we are working on how to deal with that moving forward.
Yep, I understand that. And I also know that according to this report in September of 2020, one of our staff members asked them to submit a letter requesting an extension of draft plan approval. It doesn't look like that letter was submitted until March of this year. Is that correct, or was there something in between?
No, that's correct. And generally, like I said, they felt they did everything. They cleared all the conditions. They entered into a subdivision agreement. The issue was the plan has not yet been registered, and that's where there was a bit of confusion.
And what is the latitude for staff to extend draft plan approval without council's consent? I know we've delegated some authority in that regard, but what is the extent of that authority?
The extent is a month-by-month extension. There is no time limit associated with it, though.
Okay, I would suggest that maybe there should be something a little tighter than this, because that's 7 months. From September last year until March of this year, and now this will be extended to June. That's quite an extensive period of time. And I'm not sure that council was made aware of the temporary extension by staff. Do you know if we were? Do you recall?
No, it generally just happens with the developer, the director, and staff.
From your perspective, would it be a reasonable request for council to ask staff to notify us when the staff extends through its delegated authority draft plan approval of a plan of subdivision?
Sure, that's definitely something we can do.
I think that would be helpful, because I think council should be aware of what the status of these things is. Thank you very much, Ms. Dolce. I appreciate your comments on this. Are there any other questions with respect to the revised or the amended consent agenda? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations in the reports? None opposed, that is carried. So who is the acting mayor, Madam Clerk? Is it still Councillor Noyes?
No, it's Councillor McDermott, but we're in the consent agenda. You're quite correct.
Still in the consent agenda. So Councillor McDermott, could I get you to deal with PDS 28, 2021 in the consent agenda? You'd need a mover, and then you can proceed from there.
28? Okay.
Yes,
Could
please.
I have a mover on that? Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any comments or questions with regards? Councillor Noyes? You're have to unmute.
My question is in regards to, is there lighting going to be on this multi-use court?
Mr. Walsh? Oh, sorry, Mr. Walsh.
Through you to the councillor. Sorry, you broke up a bit. Is there lighting? Is
Yes.
that the question? No, the surface, this facility is very basic, and it just includes the fencing, benches, paving. So it's very basic.
Has there, if I can continue, Councillor McDermott? I know that I've had some requests for some of the multi-use courts here in Ward 6, and they have requested that there, can lighting be put in, and I know they can't because it's so expensive now, because it's after the fact. But if it was done in anticipation that it may be a benefit. I don't know if we've ever looked at that, whether we've ever gained comment on whether they would be used more or not, or whether the cost would be prohibitive.
Sorry, through you to the councillor. I would have to look into that further, whether it would be cost prohibitive. I know Ms. Hansen's trying to join, and I'm not sure if she has looked into the cost of that lighting for this site in particular, but we aren't proposing it at this time.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Zanko?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Ms. Dolch. Just further to Councillor Noyes's comment, I'm wondering if maybe we defer this to look into that, because I do have to agree, although I haven't had any requests for that. I just know that Ferndale Park in general is a very, very heavily used park. So to Councillor Noyes's point, if this would be more cost efficient to do now at this time rather than after the fact, maybe we should look into that.
Through you to the councillor. Actually, I just heard from Mrs. Hansen, and generally the approach is that when it is in an urban area near residential dwellings, we tend not to use the lighting because it tends to cause complaints because of the nighttime lighting with adjacent neighbors. We do try to avoid it for light pollution purposes in the urban areas to minimize the lights.
So, yeah, I mean, the park is just such a big space. I'm just trying to visualize it. I know on one side I don't think there's any neighbors. On the side that is pretty well blocked by the soccer building. I'm just wondering if maybe we should take a look at it. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but parks are normally quite a much smaller space that have residential surroundings, where this one is a bit unique.
Well,
Through you to the councillor. And if you like, we can look into that a bit further. It obviously delay the construction of this site till later in the year, but we can definitely look into it and try to get you some pricing at this point, if you'd like.
You know what? Oh, sorry.
Mr. Cookett, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, if I could just add, I think if I could recommend that we award this contract, and in the interim, just to keep things moving, get some pricing for lighting. It can be added on as a change order. There will be a contingency in the contract, but I think it would be good to keep it moving. It's hard to pin down a price for lighting because in this particular area, I know the rock elevation is very high. So to install poles is going to be very expensive. And it will actually delay the project because there is an issue with getting the material. As Councillor McDermott knows, we're having an issue with repairing some lights because we can't get the materials to fix those lights. So I would strongly recommend us moving forward with this, but in the meantime, we'll get a price and bring that back to council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cookett. Councillor Noyes?
And I appreciate everyone's comment. And I think if we follow Mr. Cookett's recommendation, but also looking perhaps at some unique ways of lighting this, because it is right beside a building, and could the lighting not kind of be extended? You know, I'm kind of thinking all the different lights that you can now have. And because it's a multi-use court, it's not just tennis anymore. Even at the basketball area where some kids want to just play and bounce the balls and things like that. I wouldn't mind getting more information on it, but again, I agree with Mr. Cookett to keep moving it forward, but kind of perhaps be a little innovative in this part. That's all. Thank you.
Anybody else on this? All in favor? Opposed? Benny? Can I see everybody's hand up there? Okay, thank you. Carrie, back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. That then takes us to planning. And that would be Councillor Zanko, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That brings us to Planning and Development Services. We do not have any presentations or delegations this evening. We do have report PDS 12/2021, which the mayor has declared a conflict with. Can I have a mover? Councillor McDermott. Actually, this was previously moved, so we don't need a mover.
That's correct. If you want me to make the motion to postpone this until June 14th for some satisfactory answers with regards to the planning still needs, I am more than willing to do that at this point.
Okay, just before you put that motion on the floor, does any other councillors have any questions or comments with this? Councillor Noyes, and if it's okay with you, Councillor McDermott, then we'll go back for your motion.
That's fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. And reading the report, the one question I would ask is that we get a copy of the license when they do get it from the government with the number of plants they're allowed to grow, so that if we ask kind of before it happens, and we won't be chasing it down. If we have any questions, we'll know, we have a little bit better understanding of what they can and can't do and how much they can do. So I wouldn't mind a copy of for the town to have a copy of the license.
Okay, I see Ms. Dolch nodding her head. Did you want to add further comment, or you made note?
Through you to the council, I did make notes, so we will try to acquire that before we come back.
Perfect, thank you. Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Butler and then Councillor Lubberts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just for the record, I no longer have a conflict of interest, and I have asked the Integrity Commissioner for clearance, and he has given it to me. But I do have some questions. Ms. Dolch and I have talked in the past with respect to this report, and we had talked about a sea of green, and that they're requesting to have many greenhouses. And I don't know that that's altogether necessary. And I wonder if you could clarify for me, Madam Chair, what the licenses, how many licenses they have for personal grow, and what number of grow they have for those personal licenses.
Ms. Dolch?
To the councillor, I would have to look that up and get back to you, the exact number. What's being proposed right now is 20 greenhouses. The number of plants, I'd have to look back up from our conversation a while back as to what that exact number was.
Okay.
Thank you. I recall that there were 3 licenses and they were each for 400 plants. And the greenhouses that they're suggesting doesn't equate to the amount of plants that they're going to be growing. It far exceeds the amount of greenhouses that they would need. I would think that 3 or 4 would be in abundance, because each license, from what I understand, is approximately 400. Each greenhouse can turn over those 400 plants, because they are planting a sea of green, which means they're using 1 to 2 potted plants on the floor per square foot. And if they are doing it in that exact way, that means that they can, in one season, they can have their 400 plants. If they don't want their season to end, and they want to have it year round, then it makes sense to me that they absolutely don't need those greenhouses. They can utilize 1 at a time, and they can have maybe a quarter grown every season, and then that way they have a continual stretch. I would like to ask why it would be necessary for a person who has a personal medical license to grow 400 plants at once. And so I wonder if that could come back at a later date when we come back from the postponement.
Ms. Dolch?
Through to the counselor, and we can clarify that. Right now, we know they have 4 licenses, up to 438 plants per license for a total of 1,752 plants. So we can clarify the specifics of the license. There's also, we did clarify with the 20 proposed greenhouses, how many, and they've indicated 87 plants per greenhouse was required for a total of 1,740 plants was what they were proposing, which is in line with their license. So, but we can provide some additional information with regard to their personal license. In terms of the growing space, we did ask them if that's what they needed, and they did indicate yes, and they were going to provide 87 plants each per greenhouse.
What, if I may, Madam Chair, what is the size of each greenhouse?
Through to the counselor, the size is 3 meters by 45 meters. 45.72, sorry, to be exact.
Sorry, so 9 by 45. So they're smaller greenhouses, is that what you're, no, so 9 by 45 meters, is that what you're saying?
3 meters by 45.
By 45 meters.
By 45.
So it's basically 1,200 square feet. So I would question why they would require 20,000 square feet if the amount of plants is only 1,200. And I wonder if you could get some clarification on that. And if I may, Madam Chair, ask one final question. Do we need to approve 20 greenhouses when we know that that's based on the square footage of each greenhouse, that they would require that many? I don't believe that they do.
Ms. Stolch?
To the counselor, we can check with our cannabis consultant to see if they have some information on the amount and size of for each plant. I don't necessarily have that information, but we can definitely look into it a bit further prior to the report coming back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go to Councillor Lubberts, so then we'll go back to you, Councillor Noyes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just a quick question on the filtration system that they're putting in these greenhouses. It was brought up at the original, when the report came on the floor originally. And I believe it was Mr. Brady said that we could specify the type of filtration system that is required in these greenhouses. And I'm wondering if we have done that to make sure that we're getting the best air quality coming out of the greenhouses.
Ms. Stolch?
To the counselor, and I don't recall that conversation with Mr. Brady, but I can tell you that the system that they have proposed, we did have it peer reviewed by an independent party that we hired to review that system, just to make sure that our consultant was also satisfied that the mitigation measure they were proposing, the air quality system they were proposing, would be adequate and not cause any odor to escape.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And if that's the case, then can we get that when this comes back after postponement, what the system is going to be and what the specifications of that system are as far as air quality?
Ms. Stolch?
Sure. We'll provide that information, and we can also include the response from our peer reviewer.
Okay, thanks.
Anything further, Councillor Lubberts?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. Is this location not the same location where there was an illegal grow up a few years ago that it was shut down by Niagara Regional Police?
Ms. Stolch?
Through you to the counselor, I would have to look back. I there may have been some growing of marijuana. Whether or not it was legal, I'd have to double check.
I have had some calls from the neighbors, but again, I don't have the ability to check up on this. Be interesting to know if it is. The other question is about their water use. They're saying they're going to use the storm retention pond or something for their water source. Is that correct?
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the councillor, and that's something we're going to report back on in terms of, yes, that's what they're using. There was concern last time this report was before you on whether or not we needed to monitor well water and whether they would use the aquifer as part of the watering source as well. So we're waiting for that clarification from them. Right now, they've indicated they're just using that pond and that stormwater for that pond system that they have on site. And that's all they'll be using, but we've asked for further clarification on a backup system just in case.
If I can continue, Councillor Zanko.
Absolutely.
I know that neighbors have called and they were saying they're concerned about the water usage because some of them are using wells, I think, in that area, and they're worried about the amount of water that will be taken out of there. I'm glad that we're going to have a little bit more information on that. And about the cannabusters, I've talked to a few people, not recently, about the cannabusters, the ones in Waynfleet and that, and they weren't terribly impressed. The residents weren't terribly impressed with how it did not did not decrease the smell, decrease it, but it didn't eliminate it. And there was something about the smell that they were now smelling. It may not have been the skunk smell, but it wasn't much better than the skunk smell. And I'm just wondering if we know of a place that's actually used these, that we can actually perhaps call the council in that particular area and see if they've had any complaints about the use of that particular use to decrease the smell. Because I don't think we've had any experience of that here in Fort Erie that I'm aware of. So I hate to say, yay, that solution is viable when perhaps it's not. And I guess the last question is, when will the report on cannabis be coming to council?
I'm sorry, the study, the full study, are you referring to?
Yeah.
Ms. Dolch?
To the councillor, right now our consultant's working on part 2. They've completed the background study work, but there is a second open house once they propose draft policies. So we're not there yet. The proposed open house, I believe, is in June. And let me just have a quick look. But that's just to go to the public with the as an open house to show them what we're proposing in terms of policies. And it is I don't actually see this open house, but I believe it's in June. It's not on our work schedule yet, but I believe it's later in June. Oh, here it is. Sorry. May 5th is it just says May actually. So in May, we have our open house scheduled. We don't know yet when in May.
Thank you. I have one further question. When this came up before, there were some bylaw infractions on this property for various reasons. I think one was the fence and there was something else going on too. Are they now in compliance?
Ms. Dolch?
It is, the fencing is an active file with bylaw enforcement. Some of the matters for bylaw enforcement have been addressed, but we're still working on the fencing. And I know Mr. Korovar has sent a letter to the owners as well about the removal of the fencing because it's not in accordance with the site plan that they've proposed.
If I can continue, I'm sorry, I said that was my last question. I have another question. If in regards to their lack of compliance in certain areas that we're kind of having to hold their feet to the fire to get compliance, I'm a bit concerned about the amount of marijuana they're planning on growing in what they're saying they're going to grow and the number of buildings and the space that they're allocating for that. It just doesn't seem to jive. I'm wondering if we can put in something, I don't know if we can or we can't, about inspections, so that if we know that they're only allowed 1,200 plants, that we can go in and count them and make sure there's 1,200 plants. Is that anything that we can do, or is that just beyond what our bylaw officers can do, even if it's written in the site plan?
Ms. Stoll?
Through to the councillor, I would have to look into that a bit further on our authority. And again, Health Canada issues the license, and it's really their inspectors that would have to do that work to make sure that whatever was issued under their license was adhered to. But prior to the report coming back, I will give some thought to that, whether there's something in some fashion we can add it under the special provisions, if there's anything I can think of that's in our jurisdiction.
And I have one further question in regards to the inspection. I did talk to someone last week, and he was saying in all of Ontario, there's only 70 inspectors from Health Canada to inspect these grow ops. He said it was 50, and now they've increased it to 70, an additional 20 inspectors. But this is for all of Ontario, and so that's why I'm thinking that we may have to take a little bit more of a direct role in this. If 70 inspectors for all of Ontario, I don't know how quick they are going to be able to respond if we have concerns. And I'm wondering if some of the growers kind of know that there just isn't enough inspections going on. So if they want to grow 1,200 or 4,000, there's no inspection. It's like a speed limit, right? You can say it's 50 kilometers, but they're going to go 70, but because they know there's no enforcement. They shouldn't, mind you, but I'm just wondering if we can somehow build something into that that we can make sure that they are compliant with the license.
Okay, Ms. Stoltz, you're going to look into that?
Through you to the councillor, I'll look into that a bit further. For site plan control, it's generally based on a land use, so I have to frame it in a fashion that it functions with the land use rather than the license itself. The license itself isn't something we issue.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes? Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just to circle back around to what I was speaking to, and just to back up Councillor Noyes, I think when you look at the site plan and you look at the number of greenhouses, I think it might be prudent for us to limit the amount of greenhouses that they need, especially if the greenhouses are 1,200 square feet. That would accommodate their needs for what they're allowed to grow with Health Canada. And just a reminder that the only reason that this site plan was approved by council was it was a preventative measure so that it wasn't an outdoor grow, and they were willing to meet the expectations of what council wanted. So I think that that we have an obligation to the neighbors, but we also have an obligation to these individuals to be fair. I think in fairness to everybody, I don't see how 20 greenhouses are necessary for personal licenses. And if that's the case, then maybe they should be going to processing, just like other licensees, plants instead of greenhouses. And maybe that's something that we should be looking at. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to get back on the retention pond and the fact that that's their intention is to use that pond. Can we limit or put a maximum use of well water that they can use if they do go into using the well water? I know that there are some golf courses that I've worked on in the past that they are limited to the amount of water they can draw out of the aquifer. And if we can do that, then I hope that planning is going to recommend that, because we don't want the neighboring property owners to be running out of water to keep this facility going.
Ms. Dolch, can you comment on that and also who would enforce that?
Through to the counselor. At this point, at this point in time, we're just waiting on more information from them first off, in terms of their backup plan. So we have asked them to lay out a backup system in case they do drain the pond for whatever reason. They have indicated to us they have no intentions on going beyond the pond limits. They're not using wells. They're not contemplating anything further, but we've said that we do want to see a backup system proposed and considered. They may contemplate a cistern, they may contemplate well water. We're just waiting to hear that answer. Once we do get that answer, we'll assess it based on what the needs are, how much water they think their backup needs may generate, and what requirements they may have from there. But until we know that answer, it's difficult to predict what they're going to choose. If they choose a cistern, obviously that's the easiest. The water's trucked in at that point.
Okay, Councillor Lubberts.
Yeah, I'm a little confused as to why they don't have this in place already, because is this report, is it not for us to authorize staff to prepare the bylaw for the site plan? And I would think that the site plan should be prepared and every question should be answered before we even enter into a site plan. So I'm confused as to why it's not done now. And my question really is, if they use well water, can we meter them and put them at a maximum?
Ms. Dolch.
Through you to the counselor. So this is the first time I've ever been asked to provide a backup system when somebody's proposed a pond. We've had ICC golf course, a number of golf courses in the area use obviously a pond type system. This is the first time I've been asked about a backup system, but we are willing to engage the developer in acquiring that information for council. Obviously the pond is what they're proposing at this point in time. We are making sure, because there's some concerns from the residents, as you've indicated, about well water. So we will confirm that, but it's not through our jurisdiction. If they are looking to secure well water and they do exceed the limits of that requirement, they would go through a separate process independent of us.
And so who would be the authority on how much they can draw from the aquifer?
Ms. Dolch.
The Ministry of Environment, Climate Change.
And so I guess we need to contact them, I guess, to see. Because I mean, golf course, I know that they're limited. I've worked on them and they've told me, and I've worked on their meters. And so I would think that an operation like this would be under the same restrictions. So can we find out from the ministry how we go about administering something like this?
Ms. Dolch. I see Mr. Walsh had his hand up too, so I wasn't sure who wanted to answer that. Okay.
Through you to the counselor. Eventually we will, once we determine if that's what they are going to use, well water. I don't know at this point, as their backup right now, they're proposing the pond at this point. So we'll go from there and see what they're going to propose. And how much water they're going to need. Once we have that information, we can report back, and that's what we're going to do. We're waiting for their information on the particulars on how much water they're looking at, everything else, but we just don't have that information at this point.
Okay, Councillor Lubberts.
Okay, I can live with that, I guess, but I hope we keep it on our radar, because we don't want them taking everybody else's water and then the neighbors run out.
Anything further?
No, that's fine.
Does any other member of council have any additional questions? I just have one, Ms. Dolch. I think you can sense from most of the council members how concerned and how this project is of great concern. And I think because of the fact there's companies that come forward and follow the process, and then it seems, I remember this one, it didn't. They started growing. We had bylaw infractions. I've drove by the property recently. The fence is still pushed over. But my question is, does staff consider the background and the history and maybe the fact that they haven't been in compliance prior to making recommendations for something like this for council to approve? I know there's still a fair bit of work left to do on this prior to the report coming back, but I'm just wondering if you consider all of these things.
So under site plan approval under the Planning Act, there's certain things I can ask for and certain things that are legislated under the Planning Act. Obviously, in terms of cannabis, it does go a bit beyond, and that's why on another occasion we did get challenged to LPAT with regard to what we were asking for under site plan approval. We don't mind asking the questions, but there's a limit to how far we can go. And what we provide to you is just the information in our reports based on what they have to provide under the Act, which they've provided. And it's very basic information for site plan approval. The only thing that we do have is we have some controls based on our zoning, which I am able to use. And that zoning bylaw does talk about a number of items within that. The separation distances and other things that we've put into place under cannabis. But just for site plan approval, it's a bit trickier in terms of what we can ask for and what we can't.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of council? We'll go back to Councillor McDermott. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, still on mute.
But,
There you are.
okay. So I'll basically move that we postpone this until June 14th, until we get the satisfactory answers that planning requires.
Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding the timing of that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries. That now brings us to report PDS 19-2021, proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 13365 Pettit Road. Can I get a mover? Oh, we don't need a mover. Actually, it's already been moved. Is there any comments or questions? Mayor Redekop.
Yeah, I'd just like to move that we defer this to, or postpone it to June the 14th, 2021, in view of the memo that we received indicating that staff is awaiting further information and the proponent is maybe looking at refining the application.
Okay. Any questions with the timing of that? All those in favor? Okay, that carries. Are there any items of new business or inquiries by council? Mayor Redekop and then Councillor Noyes.
Yeah, thank you. We've had a number of calls, and I know that our bylaw enforcement people have responded to a number of situations over the last week or so with respect to the short-term rentals. And since the lockdown was announced just before Easter, and then the stay-at-home order last Wednesday, there has continued to be individuals who are renting short-term properties, and the provincial rules under shutdown are that short-term rental accommodations are only to be provided to individuals who are in need of housing. And if it's a gray zone, if we were to go back to the gray zone type deal, it's the same wording. Short-term rental accommodations shall ensure that any rentals are only provided to individuals who are in need of housing. And we've had our bylaw enforcement people go out, and there's at least one property that we're aware of where, despite the fact there's supposedly some type of longer term lease, there is a continuous change of people day after day. And I've discussed this with the clerk. We have a bylaw that deals with these things, but there's nothing in our current bylaw that says that a short-term rental owner is obligated to obtain information to verify that when they're renting out their property during a lockdown or such other time as the provincial government makes provision for it to be only to individuals in need of housing. We don't have that, but I think we should have that. Now, from a logistical perspective, if we were to give notice of motion at a regular council meeting, that would be on April the 26th, I believe. And then it would be the end of May before we would have the ability to have that bylaw amended if we follow that procedure. I've asked the clerk about the possibility of giving notice of motion this evening, which would require us to waive the rules. And I didn't ask the clerk this, but I'd like to be able to ask the clerk if I could. If we could waive the rules this evening to give notice of motion for this to be dealt with next Monday at the next council and committee meeting. So at least there would be some information out there. The view being that if an amendment is made and approved by this council to require an owner to obtain documentation to verify that the individual to whom they are renting is in fact in need of housing, we could then amend the bylaw on April the 26th. So I don't know how many people have lost me so far, but the intent is to make sure that before we go too much further down this road, when we're in situations where provincial or other laws require it, that the owner of the short-term rental property gets the information necessary so that they can show us that they have attempted to verify that in fact it is a person in need of housing. If we put that into the bylaw, we would provide for a penalty if the owner violated the requirement by failing to get the information, the verification, or by obtaining information or verification that really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. So there would be demerit points and there would be an administrative penalty. So if I might, now I'll go back to the clerk, if I might, Madam Chair, to ask, is it possible to give notice of motion this evening by waiving the rules, but have the motion dealt with next Monday so that councillors would be clear on exactly what it is rather than me continuing to ramble on and try to explain what the wording would be without giving councillors a heads up.
Yes, so that would be to waive the rules this evening, to give notice of motion, and also to waive the rules to have the motion returnable on April the 19th.
Correct. So I would like to move that, Madam Chair, and the intent is to amend the short-term rental bylaw to provide that that the one paragraph that requires compliance with federal, provincial law or regulations or municipal bylaws would also include regional bylaws and provincial orders. The second thing would be to require the short-term rental owner to obtain a valid verification that the individual during a period of where they have to obtain verification of the person being in need of housing, that they get that verification and that there be appropriate demerit points or administrative penalty attached to a violation of those that change. So I'm asking then that we waive the rules to allow me to give that notice of motion this evening and to waive the rules so that be returnable at a council and committee meeting next Monday.
Okay. Madam Clerk, just for clarification, are we voting on waiving the rules of procedure first? Or how would you like us to do this?
First, you would need to vote on waiving the rules in order to give notice of motion and to have it returnable April the 19th. That's
Okay.
what you mean.
Okay, that is
And then Mayor Redekop would give his notice of motion.
Okay, that is on the floor. Is there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, that carries.
So
Mayor.
if I might, then
Yeah.
the notice of motion would be to amend section 5(1)K of bylaw 113-2019, which currently provides that no owner shall operate contrary to any applicable federal or provincial law or regulations or municipal bylaws, to be amended to read that no owner shall operate contrary to any applicable federal, provincial, regional laws, regulations, or orders, or municipal bylaws. And further, that we add a subsection 5.1L, which states that no owner shall rent to an individual where a law referred to in subsection 5.1K prohibits rentals to an individual who is not in need of housing without obtaining valid verification that the individual is in need of housing. And then also to add a number of demerit points and an administrative penalty, which I would ask staff to provide me with some advice on between now and next Monday. And so that would be returnable April the 19th.
Okay,
Thank you.
is there any other inquiries or new business items? Councillor Butler and then Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I received a phone call from a resident on the corner of Albany and, oh gosh, no, can't remember the crossroad. It's near Albert Street anyway, I think it's Ferguson. But there was some clear cutting in the back there. There's an apartment building and then there was some clear cutting that was in the back there. And it's now a retention pond and a walk around, so people can walk around the retention pond, and they're having all kinds of problems with people with dogs leaving messes in plastic bags, and same thing that we've been experiencing off of the trails. Is there, there's also been drug needles that have been found, and I'm just wondering if there is a way that we could monitor that through bylaw.
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the councillor, the pond is not yet assumed by the town, so it's under the developer's purview still, but we can have it's difficult to try to catch people obviously in the act, which is the hard part, but we can definitely, I can have Byla do some drive-bys as part of their beach patrols coming up.
Okay, thank you. I wonder then, if it's still under the developer's purview, are they going to be building in behind there? Is that the whole reason for the retention pond?
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the councillor, we just haven't yet assumed it. Once we assume it, it'll be under the towns. But right now, they've done the work, but we're just not there yet in terms of accepting their work.
If I may, Madam Chair, just one final question then, because I was going to save it for Mr. Welsh, but since it's still under the developer's purview, there's also problems then with maintenance of that pond. And I wonder if we could take a look at that as well.
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the councillor, yes, I will have somebody look at that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I just speak to that point, those points that were raised? I would think that perhaps Mr. Cookett can raise the issue of the drugs with the police. They could maybe run people by there periodically, number one. And number two, this kind of goes to the issue that we've been talking about with respect to other parks and trails in terms of signage for waste and that type of thing, and making sure that we've got adequate waste bins. Obviously, we're not putting up waste bins until we own that stormwater management pond, but I know that there's an intention to put in some, and there has been some landscaping put in. So I'm wondering whether that also might be part of a potential solution, so that at least we can invite people to put their dog excrement. If they're putting them in bags, that means they're somewhat responsible. Maybe we could have garbage bins that they could deposit them in, or something of that nature.
Councillor Noyes, you had your hand up as well.
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. I have 3 questions, actually. The first one has to do with the backstop on River Trail. I know that that was removed about 2 weeks ago. I know there is a process in place that we have for equipment where we anticipate the lifespan of the equipment, and we do annual inspections. And then we kind of have a plan to replace. In other words, if its lifespan is 20 years and we're at 17, we start putting money in the budget to replace this. Now, I understand this backstop is going to cost around $20,000 to replace. And I don't recall it coming up in the budget at all, or even being referred to. I got some calls from some of the residents, and as you know, we're in COVID, and most of the organized sports and everything else are gone. And this was a very well-used backstop. A lot of, moms and dads and kids were playing on it, and a few neighborhood games, so to speak, with a few players and things like that. And just to really add to the historic thing, this is where Nick Weglars actually learned his trade in baseball. He was one of the, he represented Canada in the Olympics, and this was the backstop that he used. I'm just really trying to add to the lily here. But I'm wondering how this was missed and how we can go about replacing it.
And Ms. Stoltz?
To the councillor, I believe through a series of emails, I think it was last week, we were made aware that the backstop had been removed. At this point, it's not part of our capital works that we were looking at for parks or other things. Should you wish us to come back and look at that through a report, we can do so. But obviously, at this point in time, we might have to push some other project in order to get that work done. We do have a full capital schedule at this point, but we'll definitely look at it. I did talk to Ms. Hanson. She said perhaps maybe in the fall we could look at putting that together with a budget amendment, but it just might not happen until the fall.
If I can continue, I have no doubt it was removed for all the right reasons, in that it was a safety issue and it didn't, that there was a reason they had to take it down for safety. I have no doubt, but again, with annual inspections and things, and this, I'm guessing, it's probably over 30 years old. We should have anticipated that at some point it would no longer be usable or be safe. So I'm hoping that this is an exception to the rule and we don't see this happening again. But I appreciate getting some more information and finding out if we can replace it in the fall. I think that's at least something. And I appreciate that. So I'm not going to belabor that point, but I have 2 more questions. One is about the status of the LCBO temporary building, which is going on 5 years, I think now. I know it came up to council before, and I think we gave them an extension for 6 months, if I'm not mistaken. They wanted like 2 years or something like that, or 3 years. I don't remember the exact details, but I noticed that it's still there. I did have an opportunity after that last meeting we discussed it to talk to Carolee from it about it and see if they've actually even contacted the Economic and Tourism Services. And if my recall is correct, Carolee mentioned that they did have one contact with them many months ago, and that was it. They showed them one spot, they weren't interested, and there was no further, they never reached out again. So I'm just wondering what the status of that is.
Sure.
Thank you through you to the councillor. The A report came forward with regard to the temporary use zoning on this site. So they've requested temporary use for up to 3 years on this site. It is supposed to come back May 10th to council. The issue we've been having is getting a response, and the concern at the time was when are they going to locate in a permanent building? We haven't yet got a response. We're working on that. We are going, our next step is to advise them that we're going to move ahead regardless of whether they provide it or not, because we're to a point we've been asking and asking and we're getting no response. So we may just be coming forward on May 10th to council with a report without that information. But at this point, we keep continuing to try to get that response.
Okay, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. One further question on another subject is the dirt hills again. And I have had a chance to talk to Ms. Dolch about this. And again, the Black Creek area, again, this is where it just keeps the problem that keeps reoccurring, is that they're now moving dirt from the subdivision on Baker Street to the subdivision on Black Creek Road, and that those poor people in that border on there have been basically eating dust for about 8 years. They finally started seeing an end. Last year, I think the developer made a good attempt to lower the hills, take down the weeds, et cetera, and it was going in the right direction. Well, now the hills are back even higher, and there's more dirt being trucked in from another development to this development. I understand from Ms. Dolch, they all can do this, but what can we do to mitigate the dust and the hardship on the residents that are basically going to be eating dust again? And it's going to be worse now because the shrubs and the trees that were on the opposite side, if you don't know the area, it's hard to describe, but there was a lot of shrubs and trees on the west side of Black Creek Road, between Black Creek Road and the Queen Elizabeth Netherby Road. So that has all now been gone. So that was at least would break the wind somewhat. So that's gone. So there's actually going to be more prevailing winds are even going to be stronger because that windbreak is no longer there. So the residents are again very worried that they're going to be eating dust and their windows are going to be coated and they're not going to be able to enjoy their backyard once again. So I'm just wondering what we can do to mitigate this.
And Ms. Dolch.
Through you to the councillor, and I'll try to keep this short as I can. But generally what has happened is I've reached out and they are allowed to keep fill on site for backfilling purposes in a construction site. So as they dig out and pour the foundations, they are allowed to keep some of the fill in order to backfill those houses that are currently going in. So that's a permitted part of construction that we allow. In terms of this new material coming in from Black Creek Signature site, I understand 2 houses were excavated. That fill was moved over to River Trail site. I have confirmed with the developer that this material is being stockpiled for another site he owns. I have now asked that it be removed and that he apply for a fill and site alteration permit for the other site he wants to move it to, and that it shouldn't remain on this site. So we are working on it. We've given him 2 weeks to contact the chief building official to expedite that fill and site alteration permit.
If I can continue, thank you for that explanation. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm sure the residents will be glad to hear that. But is there any penalty? Like, they weren't supposed to do it. Is there any penalty for them for? We're saying, okay, you shouldn't have done that. Now correct it. But is there any penalty to dissuade them from doing it again in the future?
Ms. Dolch.
Through you to the councillor, it is tricky because it is construction site. Obviously, I've just gotten this information because we kept challenging. Originally, I was told it was for backfill purposes, but now I've been told that it is some stockpiling for another site that they own. So now that we're aware of it, obviously we're going to deal with it. In terms of the penalties, the fill and site alteration does allow for some of that to remain for construction, active construction sites. So it would be a tough one, I think, to penalize. It would just be harder to penalize. I'm not saying we couldn't, but I'm hoping it'll just be rectified in short order.
I can continue. Thank you, Ms. Dolce, for that. I'm hoping that the price of trucking it back and forth will be extremely high, so they'll realize that they can't get away with it in the future. But I'm sure the residents will appreciate seeing the hills coming down. And it was pretty obvious to people living there that there's no way they could use this amount of fill in the area that they required, where they were putting it. That unless there were going to be houses on top of mountains, that there was way too much fill coming into that site. Thank you.
Does any other member of council have any inquiries or new business? Okay. Seeing none, is there any questions with the business status report? Seeing none, I will hand the chair back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanko. That then takes us to infrastructure services, and I believe that's Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Infrastructure services is now in session. We have no presentations or delegations. We have no reports. So we'll move right into new business and inquiries. Councillor Zanko and Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Walsh. Just a comment. I wanted to thank you and staff. I noticed that there is several more garbages out along the trail. Over the weekend, I seen that, and they're being used, and I think that residents will be very happy. So I want to thank you for expediting that, and thank you to Mr. Hutton for expediting that as well. And that's it.
Mr. Walsh, you want to comment at all on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are rolling out our program now where our staff are transferring out of the arenas because of COVID. We've got more staff and certainly more time to get into the summer program.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Zanko? Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Walsh. We've had some residents out in the beach that were very concerned about the fact that since November, they've been trying to get a street light. And we had a conversation, you and I, on the phone. Maybe you can explain to the people that are listening exactly what the dilemma is with getting these lights repaired.
Thank you. When we replaced our old streetlights with our LED streetlights about 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, it wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution for every light. We have about 15 different light types throughout the system. We try and keep some spares available, but due to the magnitude of keeping spares for everything, and frankly, not knowing when these things are going to expire, it's difficult to keep an adequate inventory in stock. We're within a 10-year warranty period on these lights right now. So any issues we have is still covered by warranty, which is good. But when we go to replace these lights, we have to fit what we order into a queue with the manufacturer because they're still in warranty. And until we can get sort of a critical mass for our order, the manufacturer simply, they're so busy they won't fit in a 1 or 2 off. So we've got to build up a number of different types and amounts for each. Like you, Councillor McDermott, I'm not happy with a 6-month wait for a replacement. If it was outside my house, I'd expect it within a month or so. We are looking into trying to get more storage on site. Until that happens, I really can't do anything. I guess the good thing from a legal point of view, and this doesn't suit anybody's needs, but from a legal point of view, we have a year to replace streetlights from when we become aware of when they're burnt out. That, like I said, that doesn't suit anybody, and that's just bad optics, and that's falling back on the legal profession to cover our butts here. But you have my word, we are trying to get more in stock, and once we learn the performance of these, we should have a better handle on what types and how many we should keep in stock.
Well, I thank you for that, but my biggest concern is when when this gets out into the public realm, it always comes down to whether they have confidence in council to make sure these things get done. And I understand now that that you have 2 or 3 pages of these lights that need to be repaired. So I'm not certain what it takes as far as a critical mass to get it out of the queue. But I mean, 3 pages, that's quite a bit. And I guess my big concern is I just hear this the other day that it's been since November for some of these folk. And I believe that we should have had at least a program of when we know we have delays like this to call these residents and tell them, you know, this is why you haven't got your light up there. Because at the end of the day, if our customer service isn't telling these folks that they're going to have to wait, and this is the reason why, people lose confidence in counselors. And counselors, of course, are finding out 6 months after this has happened, and it's just the way it works, and it's nobody's fault. But I think that the people on that list, if they're going to have to wait another number of months for this stuff, I think that we should be contacting them and speaking with them. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, we can certainly go back, look at our list. Anything I would say older than 2 months, we can give them a note and let them know what's going on. Certainly.
Anything further, Councillor McDermott?
I guess maybe one question. Do we have any idea what time frame we're looking at? Because I mean, if it's 6 months now, I just don't want it to go too far down the road.
Yeah, I understand your concerns. Right now, like I've been chasing this all last week. I don't know that answer right now. When I know, I will let council know.
That's all for me, Councillor Lubberts.
Yeah, Mr. Walsh, just to add into that, you were saying that our obligation as a municipality is we have a year to replace a light if it goes out legally. But that's if we have the system and we need to replace a lamp. But this is warranty. Is there anything in our contract that says how the warranty will be dealt with? Because this is the manufacturer has to have some kind of responsibility for his warranty. And why are we have to wait until we need 50 lamps before they'll honor their warranty? That I know what you're saying about the legal matter, but is there anything in our contract that says warranty will be dealt with in a time frame?
I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Lubberts. I can look into it, but I suspect there isn't a time performance metric in there. Frankly, I would never have imagined it would be this long.
Yeah, because what I'm hearing is this was a problem in November. And now they're saying it's going to be 6 months to get the light. Well, if we would have done it in November, 6 months would just be a few weeks away. Why is it 6 months from now and wasn't 6 months from, or was it a year from November? And why didn't they tell us it was going to be a year from November?
We don't have a time frame of when the lights will be delivered from the manufacturer right now.
Yeah, but why are they telling you it's 6 months from now and it wasn't?
They haven't told us a time.
Right.
We've been in the queue for 6 months. That's when we've notified, as we become aware of these, we send a note off to the warranty holder right away that we need this type of light or that type of light. So yeah, our notification is immediate.
Now, I know myself being in the electrical business, there's alternate products that you can purchase. So if this manufacturer can't produce his product, can we get an alternate that will substitute his product?
We can, but we will pay. In this case,
Or we
right now,
back charge him?
yeah, they're under warranty. The heads are they're not cheap by any means. And I imagine once our warranty is over in a few more years, that we will look at appropriate suppliers and put performance metrics on them.
Well, can we look now at an alternate product and back charge the manufacturer? Can we at
Well,
least look into
we
it?
can look at a different product certainly, and we can back charge the warranty holder. Whether they accept those charges or not is a different matter.
Like, can we at least look into it?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Redekop, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'm a little confused here as to whether we've got a warranty that deals with the infrastructure that was put in, or just the lights, or both, whether there's some type of service contract that deals with any of this or not. Could that just be clarified?
Through you, Chair. We have a service contract with a lighting firm, an overhead lighting firm out of Hamilton. Their name escapes me right now. They are not the firm that installed the lights, but we do execute the warranty through the manufacturer.
So my suggestion, Mr. Chair, would be that we have the lawyer take a look at this contract, because a warranty that allows the supplier or the manufacturer an indefinite period of time within which to meet its obligations isn't really much of a warranty. So I can't imagine that it's that wide open. But I think we should have the lawyer take a look at that and see what the obligations are and what we can expect. Because 6 months, 8 months, that's not much of a warranty at all. And I can't imagine that it would be good for future business for any company that is treating its customers in that fashion. So I think we should look into that as well.
Yeah, I agree. Mr. Walls, can you contact legal, or would that be done through the clerk?
No, I can do that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councillor McDermott, anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one question, if I could, to Jonathan, with regards to his conversations with the Municipal Disaster Relief Assistance Administrators with regards to Waverly. I think most everybody gets emails at least once or twice a week with regards to the trail and the shape that it's in. I understand we've had some dilemmas trying to get the cash to come and take care of us from the province with regards to that disaster that took place in 2019. Maybe you could fill us in on where we're at with those conversations.
Sure. The province has had the town's application since the end of February of 2020, so just over 13 months. We met with the provincial MDRA group about 5 weeks ago. At that time, we were given some reasons for the delay and also given some specific timeframes for them to finally finish their review and to hear back. It's been an extra 2 weeks that have passed for that time frame. So we've drafted a letter to send to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to advocate for the province to expedite our file so that we can move forward. We did subsequently hear that there will be a review meeting later this week, and so hopefully we'll have an additional update then.
Councillor McDermott?
Thank you, Councillor.
Anything further? Any other members of council, any new business or inquiries? Seeing none, that takes us to business status report. Any comments or questions? Mr. Wolf.
Councillor Butler had a question.
Oh, Councillor Butler? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question with respect to some information that you provided us with in regards to McDonald Drive in between Rose Hill and Birdie Bay, where that is a bit of a private drive, but there's some question with respect to what responsibilities I wear with the lights that are burned out. Do we have a handle on that yet? On how we can handle that?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, from the town's point of view, they're not our lights. That's the way we were approaching this. As the email stated, CNP didn't have much communication with the town, nor the Parks Commission, nor the owners of private lights, of which there are many that have contracted with CNP, that they were turning over or at least abandoning ownership of the lighting system. So it's town's positions at this point that those lights are not ours.
So if they have not been paying for the power usage, who has been paying for it?
We don't know, frankly. The majority of our street lights are not metered, so we get a bundled bill. Between us and CNP, we estimate time and usage of electricity, and a bill is developed from there. We'd have to do a deep dive in to the bill to see if we were paying or somebody else's.
Is that feasible to do then, to find out who actually, if the town had been paying for it? Because if the town has been paying for it, it would seem to me that there's kind of an ownership there, right? I know that in speaking to some of the residents on McDonald Drive, there's some talk about not having it be a private road, but that's a whole totally different discussion that we can have off of this. But but I just wondered if maybe you could have an opportunity to ask those questions of CNP.
We can look through you, Mr. Chair. We can look into it. I'm not sure we're going to get the answer though.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Walsh, wouldn't that group of residents have like some type of homeowners association or down there? Wouldn't they have something like that on record of who owns what and who pays for what?
I don't know what they have out there. As Councillor Butler indicated, the road is private out there. I don't know how they pay for maintenance on that road, snow plowing, etc.
Okay, all right. Councillor Butler, you want to go further?
Yeah, just to let you know that the mayor and Mr. Walsh have been back and forth with the resident that inquired about it. So the mayor did send an email asking for particulars. So as soon as we have that, that will help us as well.
And Mr. Walsh, and I guess the mayor too, would the Canadian Niagara, would they not have a list of private streetlight owners?
Councillor, I'm not sure what records they have. When they turned over the streetlights or abandoned ownership of the streetlights a number of years ago, we had to go through and figure out what we owned. The reason we're saying we didn't own these is it's a private road, frankly, and we didn't go down private driveways or private roads looking to take on any more maintenance than we already have.
Yeah, but I would think that CNP would have a list. I mean, they're billing. If they're not billing for these lights, then they need to provide us with who's paying for them.
Well, you would think that, but you might be surprised too.
Yeah, I get surprised a lot. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, now we can go to the business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will turn the chair back to Mayor Redekop.
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. That then takes us to Corporate and Community Services, Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Corporate Community Services is now in session. We have no presentation and delegations. We have report 10.2, reports on land matters. Anybody?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Any new business inquiries? Seeing none, we'll move to the business status report. Any questions about that? Back to you, Your Worship.
Councillor McDermott, that was unbelievable. Just when we needed a fast section, you came through for us. So are there any meetings that anyone wishes to announce? Councillor Zanko.
Thank you. Yes, Your Worship. We have a Fort Erie Active Transportation Committee meeting being held virtually tomorrow at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you. Are there any other meetings? Councillor Noyes.
Yes, there is a short term rental appeals hearing on Wednesday, the 21st at 4 p.m.
Thank you. Any others? There being none, and in the absence of Councillor Dubanow, somebody's got to step up and move that we adjourn. Councillor McDermott, I knew you'd come through. Any questions or comments? All those in favor of adjourning? That is unanimous.